Let us now talk, though, to Nick Freeman, lawyer and road safety campaigner, because we haven't spoken for a while, and it's time for an update on the e-bike and e-scooter scenario. Nick, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Morning, Mike.
Nice to talk to you. We haven't spoken for a while.
No.
You've got something to say about e-bike riders who seemingly now are doing a lot more speeding than they used to be. What's going on?
Well, the e-bikes are a fascinating subject, and they're similar to e-scooters, except in my view, whilst they're better for your health, they're far more dangerous because they're much bigger, and they are in fact 57% more dangerous than pedal cycles.
Wow.
That's what a Danish survey has shown,
right.
And that's obvious because of the size. And it's the same problem with e-scooters. There is inadequate regulation. So at the moment, anyone who is 14 and over can get onto one of these electrically assisted powered cycles, and they can use them. And the maximum speed is supposed to be 200. The speed's 15.5 miles an hour, but that's not the maximum speed of the bike. The bike can go far faster than that. The rule is that it's the motor, the electric motor, that can only propel the machine up to that speed, and afterwards you're relying on pedal power.
Right.
So you can have a situation which happens where you have a heavy machine that's going very quickly, with no legislation really in place, completely inadequate legislation, and there are accidents on pavements. It's exactly the same scenario as e-scooters. You know, they're flouting the law, right, and there's no means of identification. So the problem is, it's fine if they stay at a fairly slow speed. So there's a simple solution, and it's such an obvious solution, and I don't know why the government just don't grasp it and just say, look, these are excellent for our health, but let's make them the same as mopeds. Let's make sure that people who are over 16 drive them, that they have a proficiency test, they either have a temporary license, they know something about the highway code, and they have a number plate, and that's critical so that we can identify the drivers, so that they will at least be responsible. And then there's the full raft of legislation. You know, at the moment, there's no law in relation to how fast you can go on one of these machines.
And they do go very, very fast. I mean, I've certainly had them running past me at sort of 30, 40 miles an hour. And they're very heavy as well, which is the thing that I think a lot of people don't appreciate. You know, somebody had once left one, because one of the things that really is irritating for those of us who live in the capital city, I know not everybody does, is people just leave the ones that you can hire just anywhere they like. You know, sometimes they're on the side, on the pavement, sometimes they're just put in a parking spot. One was in a place where I normally park my car, and I tried to move it, thinking, well, I can't wheel it because I'm not going to, you know, I haven't got access to the code or anything. I tried to lift it, and it was so heavy I couldn't lift it.
Yeah.
And so if something like that hits you at sort of 30 miles an hour, that's a deadly weapon, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's like a moped, and the point is, the ones you're seeing going at 30 and 40 miles an hour fall foul of the legislation, because they obviously have much greater power than 250 watts, which is the maximum power. Yeah. And so how are the government ever going to regulate this? What are we going to do? Have police on the streets checking every electric scooter, electric bike they see? It's never going to happen. Just have a very simple rule. These electric bikes are great. Let's encourage people to use them because there's exercise involved, but let's make them comply as a moped with legislation. In my view, 14 is far too young to be using one of these machines. So let's increase the age to 16. Let's have speed limits. Let's have a drink drive limit. Let's have a drug drive limit. And let's have penalty points, endorsements, and exactly the same legislation that applies to cars. It will help make our roads safer, and people won't be so inclined to ride on pavements, go through red lights, etc., etc. But they're far more dangerous than e-scooters because of their weight and size, and they're becoming increasingly popular because people want to be healthy, and they're safer for users to use because they're more solid, they're better constructed, and the wheels are much bigger. So in my view, it's an ideal solution. They're better than e-scooters.
It is.
They should be encouraged. Yeah.
It is. They appear to be more roadworthy as well. But do you have any idea, is there any data on how many of these e-bikes, I should say, are kind of illegal imports or sort of bodged bikes? Because we've also seen a recent kind of increase in the number of sort of spontaneously combusting batteries on these things, because we're told that that's down to the fact that the battery might be bought from some foreign country, it might have been bought online, it's maybe not compatible with the charging purpose, and the warning has now been given out basically by the fire brigade to say, do not charge these things overnight, do not charge them inside a property, because that's actually dangerous.
Yeah, there's a huge fire risk. So only anecdotally, I haven't found any statistics about how many are out there and the problems with them in terms of fire risk, etc., etc. But anecdotally, I hear that the vast majority are in fact not non-compliant with the legislation, are in fact more than 250 watts, because people who want them, they want to go fast. So if you like, it's a loophole. They're using these, knowing they're not going to be checked unless they're involved in an accident. And they should, in fact, be classified already as mopeds or motorbikes. I had one that overtook me in a 40-mile-an-hour limit, going about 70 miles an hour. No helmet, probably no insurance, no nothing, just going past me, and it was an electric bike. So clearly it was something that had a different battery and it fell foul of the legislation. Yes. We're not going to have a situation ever, are we, where we've got a sufficient resource to check these things. So just a blanket approach, let's make them all legally compliant as mopeds.
Well, I mean, you say that. You say that, Nick, but we've been there before, haven't we, you and I, trying to get the government and the Parliament, at least in this country, to debate this matter. What we are going to have very soon is enough cameras, certainly in Greater London, to be able to film everything as it happens. So surely, if you can catch people in a ULEZ zone they didn't know they were in, surely to heavens we could come up with a plan to actually recognise these vehicles, as you call them, if they had some kind of registration on them.
Well, a proper registration plate. They're big enough to have a proper registration plate. At the moment, you have the ludicrous situation where most of London, or 57 miles at the moment of London, is confined to a 20-mile-an-hour limit. And these bikes are not confined to that limit. They can go as fast as they want. Yeah. How dangerous and how stupid is that? So another reason why I'm sure Mr. Khan, as he's so eager to reduce all the speed limits everywhere, which in my view is completely wrong. But, he should be pressurising the government to say, look, we need to get a grip of these because they are dangerous. And he obviously wants the roads to be much safer. So I'd invite him to do so. I wonder what his plans are, what representations he's already making to the government in relation to these very useful but dangerous machines.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. Well, you'll be pleased to know, Nick, that Just Stop Oil are out in force today. They did warn at the weekend that they were going to try and bring London to a complete stop, basically. They were going to have their biggest ever slow march protest. It's now been revealed that more than 200 of them targeted 14 locations across London. They said they would paralyse the capital. We believe 15 of them have already been arrested. This is breaking news, by the way. This is what we're seeing. I don't know if it was them that managed to shut off Tower Bridge this morning, but that caused an awful lot of mayhem, not least to me trying to get into work. I know this is maybe not your area of law, but I mean, how are we going to stop these people from doing this?
Very, very simply, you have legislation has been changed so that the legislation has teeth, and these people are bringing the city and other places to a halt. That there is legislation to lock them up for a long time. Yeah. And in my view, that legislation works, but what you need is emergency courts. They're arrested straight away. The police swoop on them. They arrest them. They're in court that afternoon. We take a plea. If they want to plead guilty, they're dealt with by a judge. They're incarcerated immediately for a significant period of time. Or if they want to plead not guilty, a trial date's fixed very quickly. We've had emergency courts before when there have been riots. I remember when Manchester rioted in the early 80s, they had emergency courts. You need a way of dealing with this very quickly so that would-be protesters think very carefully about the damage they're causing. I mean, you imagine the cost to the City of London today. How much has that cost the taxpayer? And when you think what they're doing is they're causing all these cars to be congested, to stay on the road, causing more pollution, exacerbating the very problem that they helped to cause. So we just need really strong action. We can't mess around. The legislation's there. Emergency courts, I think, is the answer. And I think that they don't want to be locked up. And I would also impose, coupled with, and I know this is against the spirit of legislation, but there need to be heavy financial penalties as well, because some of these people don't even mind being incarcerated. No. But if you hit them in the pocket as well.
Most of them are living off, unearned income, generally speaking. Yeah. They're all sort of sons and daughters of wealthy people, and if they're not, they're sort of reasonably well-off retarees who've got nothing to lose.
And they've got nothing better to do with their time, and that's half the problem, isn't it? If they were trying to run a business, work for a living, they wouldn't have time. They'd express themselves in a different way. So a pincer movement, custody, and heavy financial penalties, I think, and emergency courts, I think that will make them think very carefully about the way they protest. They're entitled to protest. They've got no problem with that, but they're not entitled to interfere with other people's lives, causing a huge cost to everybody, particularly at a time when we can't afford it. And why shouldn't people be allowed to get on with their own day-to-day business in the way they choose? Who are these people to disrupt and say, no, I don't want you to get to work today. I don't want this to happen. It's just ludicrous that we as a democratic society tolerate it. We're far too soft.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the police are doing as we're watching this footage here, but they seem to have been walking them sort of down a road and then sort of off the road. So if they're doing that, then I'm all in favour of that. I don't mind. I don't particularly want to send people to jail, but if that's what it takes to make them stop, then that would be good. But if there's another method, then by all means, you know, let's see it. But I think the other thing we could do is look at who's financing them, because they've obviously got quite a lot of money coming their way. And we know for one thing that Dale Vince has admitted to being a bankroller of their campaigns. He's quite open about it. Why don't we start finding the people that are funding what is essentially criminal activity?
Well, exactly. Find them and find the organisation. It's an organisation, so you can hit the roots of the financial support. I think is a really good idea. If you've got a picture there now that they're blocking the road, if they keep themselves to the pavement, that's fine. But doing what they're doing now, as you're showing this, in my view, just should not be accepted. The police should swoop in there, handcuff them, sling them in a van, take them to court. And the court should deal with them very quickly and take a plea. And if that sounds robust, well, it is intended to be robust because, we live in a democracy and we're entitled to do our own thing in our own lives. And we're not entitled to stand by and let people disrupt it in the way that seems to be happening. We've just gone soft.
Yeah, I think that is the problem. I think everybody would agree with what you've just said, Nick. Thank you very much indeed. Nick Freeman, lawyer and road safety campaigner. You know, it's all very well trying to get legislation to cover the likes of e-bikes and e-scooters, but how about we get some proper legislation? We've now got it, by the way, to get rid of these absolute idiots, these Just Stop Oil cretins who think that targeting 14 locations across London and bringing the city to a standstill is a great way to spend a Monday morning and a Monday afternoon. Well, it isn't.